Disclaimer, I mispronounced the fucking names to high hell in this stupid video. Instead of Shersa, I say Shersay. Instead of Aisling, I say Ashley. Instead of Parvana, I say Parwana, so I'm really sorry. I'm a fucking, Jesus fucking Christ. I should have finished college. Well, this video is long overdue. Ever since I started this shit, I've wanted to review the works of Tom Moore and Nora Tumay. Even though nowadays, with all the notoriety and praise the studio has received, it's kinda hard to classify it as underrated. But hey, you know what? Your mother. Cartoon Saloon started its humble beginnings in Kilkenny, Ireland in 1999, and right around that time, these two, along with their co-founder, Paul Young, developed a trailer for Secret of Kells. However, that wouldn't make its way into production until 2005, but after a meeting with a French film company, Les Amateurs, Secret of Kells was launched into production and would put the studio on the map in 2009. Tom Moore has stated that this studio's cinematic work was inspired by The Thief and the Cobbler and Mulan, both of which took indigenous traditional art as the starting point for a beautiful style of 2D animation. Moore and his colleagues felt that something similar could be done with Irish art. And already, with 4 films under their belt, they have created some of the most ambitious, beautiful, and heartfelt 2D hand-drawn animated films in recent memory. Suck it, Disney! Suck it fucking good, you little bitch! So today, I'm going to be reviewing, comparing, and contrasting each of Cartoon Saloon's films. Finally. Oh, and no spoilers unless I specify. Time codes and shit. Here we go. The Secret of Kells is very, very good. In fact, it's a lot better than I remember it. When it first came out in 2009, I remembered liking it, especially the animation, but I felt it was narratively lacking, and I didn't particularly care about the characters. Which, yeah, in that department, it's nowhere near as strong as these 3 titans, but even so, Secret of Kells actually manages to hold its own up against them. I dare even say it's their most underrated work. A lot of the visual and musical concepts that they refined in later films are pioneered here, which after all this time was really cool to see. Revisiting this movie was a rather charming experience, especially considering how much of a passion project it was for Tom Moore and his colleagues. It's very apparent in the opening alone. This is a haunting, creepy, and ominous 60 seconds that foreshadows the darkness to come, and Ashley's whispering narration is really fucking unsettling.
I've lived too many ages. This yarns of salmon, deer, and wolf.
We then cut to the walled village of Kells in medieval Ireland, where a young illuminator apprentice, Brendan, lives under the scrutiny of his uncle, who is the abbot of Kells. An illuminator is basically an Aasimar monk in this universe, but they use a special magic ink that allows them to create moving mandalas that illuminates anyone who sees it. And this wall in question is being built in preparation for the dreaded Northmen Vikings, who have been pillaging and killing thousands of villages in Ireland. It's also to keep the sacred Book of Iona, which is filled with trippy-ass scripture, safe from harm. But when a famed illuminator, Brother Aidan, arrives at Kells, he garners the admiration of Brendan. Aidan shows him his illumination scripture, and Aidan entices Brendan to venture outside the walls to collect special ink berries for the scripture. Brendan, of course, goes into the forest, but quickly gets lost, and along the way gets intercepted by a pack of wolves. However, he's saved by a shape-shifting fae named Ashley, who shows him a wonderland of psychedelic animation. This whole sequence is just magnificent. This forest is one of the best things Saloon has ever made. made. The layout work and compositing is, in all honesty, my favorites out of all the films. The flat panoramic backgrounds framed like stained glass windows in medieval tapestry are a feast for the eyes. It's a very inventive style that helps immerse you into this Irish setting. Though I must be honest, some of the character designs are, questionable. As the film progresses, Brendan continues his apprenticeship as an illuminator and visits Ashley in the forest every so often. And the rest you'll have to see for yourself, because there are some legitimately dramatic and, dare I say, unexpected plot turns. More so near the end of the second act onward. This movie has some really dark, really painful, and really somber consequences, which I completely forgot about. But when it happened, I was like, fucking A, that's brutal. And you know, I really respect this movie for that. Cartoon Saloon came out the gate taking chances that conventional animated films don't take, which is probably why it didn't do so well. Also considering it was from an obscure Irish studio, yeah, Hollywood fucking sucks, what can I say? But even though there are undoubtedly some awkwardly executed moments, the product as a whole is a surprisingly mature, tragic, and existential story. 8 out of 10. I really like it. Skip to here for my Song of the Sea review because I'm gonna be talking about spoilers now. Okay, so the end of the second act and rest of the third act are where this movie gets really, really good. Up until then, it's a perfectly fine family fantasy adventure, but then it takes a pretty dark turn. Brendan goes into the forest to retrieve the Eye of Crom, a giant eel that exudes dark magic. Along the way, Ashley vows to help him, but Crom has left his insignia on Ashley already, so her human form is in jeopardy. Despite this, she still helps Brendan enter the tomb, but he gets pulled in by black tendrils. Then, I'm not even shitting you, Ashley gets fucking crushed by the tomb door. What follows is a fantastically animated sequence with Brendan trying to rob the crystal eye of Crom. And again, I cannot understate the sheer amount of talent Tom Moore and his team displayed in their first feature. Brendan manages to get the eye and escapes the tomb, where he sees that Ashley's spirit has simply returned to the forest, and is assured that she's not really dead, but her human vessel ceases to exist. Which is pretty sad, because this is the last time he sees her in her human form, but more on that later. Brendan returns with the crystal and continues his apprenticeship with Brother Aiden, which starts garnering the attention of all the village folk, and of course, inevitably, the abbot finds out and is obviously very angry that his nephew has been dodging his manual labor responsibilities. But his priorities are set on the incoming Northman attack, and they must prepare all defenses necessary. The abbot, in a fit of rage, locks both Brendan and Aiden in his hut, and soon enough, the Northmen begin their attack. And this scene is kinda brutal. I mean, obviously you don't see anyone die, but it's blatantly obvious that all of these villagers are being mindlessly slaughtered. The Vikings aren't pulling any punches. They kill on sight. Even the abbot gets arrowed in the chest. During this chaos, Brendan and Aiden manage to escape into the forest with the help of Ashley and her wolves. Meanwhile, the Vikings pillage and kill the rest of what they can find and abandon yet another unfortunate society. The surviving villagers gather round the abbot and help him back to his castle. So yeah, the Vikings won. The village is destroyed, and while he tried to save his uncle, Brendan ultimately had no choice but to abandon him in the midst of destruction. You know, it's for kids. Then, through this extremely clever passage of time shot, many years pass as Brendan and Aiden travel the landscapes of Ireland, documenting their findings and experiences in the Book of Iona. It's never specified how many years pass, but I've always estimated that this was a 15-year time skip. Aiden, being near the end of his life, urges Brendan to travel to the next village to teach the next generation of illuminators. Along his trek, he runs into a white wolf, one he recognizes from his childhood. Without uttering a word, she then directs him to the ruins of Kells. We see the elderly abbot, filled with deep sadness. He still possesses the drawing Brendan made years ago, as it's the only relic that survived the destruction of the Vikings. He expresses to his caretaker that he regrets how he treated his nephew. He was just a boy with a passion and he crushed his relationship with with him. He laments over all the innocent lives that were taken that day, and how Brendan was right about how the Book of Iona could have helped them avoid this tragedy. This is actually a hard-hitting reality that I genuinely did not see coming from this movie. The abbot in his old age wishing he could redo his actions is pretty heartbreaking. But then, Brendan shows up to his tower, where the abbot is bewildered in disbelief. They share a sentimental reunion, as Brendan is more optimistic than ever. He says that he and Aiden have finished the book, and he shows the final page to his uncle, who gazes into the illuminations his nephew has discovered. So, with all that said, you may be asking yourself, what is the secret of Kells? Well, I have a few theories. Okay, no, but in all seriousness, I do have one theory. But first, I think it's worth mentioning what the filmmakers had in mind for the themes and symbols. It was meant for the Book of Iona, or the Book of Kells, to represent the Christian Bible, and in that regard, illuminators would be merchants of God, meant to spread the good word, and Ashley is meant to represent the old pagan traditions of Ireland before Christianity was implemented, which would explain why Ashley's human form dies as Brendan's commitment to the Book of Iona strengthens. So in no way am I undermining what the filmmakers had in mind, but obviously upon rewatching it, I had my own interpretations. My take is that the secret of Kells is something that the audience isn't really meant to know. It's something only illuminators can find out through years of life experience and devotion to their studies. And these drawings are the culmination of all their life experiences. And in that sense, the actual secret of Kells can vary depending on what you've been through, what you've learned, and how you've grown throughout your life. The movie never gives us a clear answer to what it is. It's meant to be ambiguous, which I really like because it encourages you to find meaning for yourself, and there's not one answer to living the best life you can live. Secret of Kells may not be the strongest film in Saloon's library, but it's one I personally have a lot of appreciation for as their first cinematic effort. Song of the Sea is fucking miraculous. My god, what a truly wonderful film. It's like if Tom Moore and Will Collins were like, okay, Kells, that was a warm-up. Now, let's break out the really hard drugs for this one. This is a dazzling and emotional story complemented by some of the most ethereal, delicate, and dreamlike animation you'll ever see. The opening prologue immediately transports you to a world of magic and wonder with its mysterious atmosphere, lullaby-esque music, and visuals. The story centers around a brother and sister who venture across the vast landscapes of Ireland in search of the great ancient giant MacLear. They seek to free his spirit from a dormant island by using the fabled Song of the Sea, which is said to unleash all of the fae and mystical forces that inhabit the Irish soil. With this power, they hope it will also bring back their long-lost mother. Now, obviously, the story is a lot more complicated than that, and I'm simplifying a lot, and to be completely honest, it's kinda hard to talk about without spoiling all the lore, themes, and mythology linked to the story, so I guess you know the drill. The movie begins with a pregnant mother, Brona, running away into the ocean to birth her newborn magical baby, Shersey. 6 years after Brona's death, Ben, the older brother, is rather abusive towards his now mute sister, as he blames her for his mother's death. The father, Connor, who is still emotionally torn over his wife's death, invites his overbearing mother over to help watch over his kids. But that night, Shersey discovers as well as a magical cloak of sorts. She starts playing the conch, which brings out a flurry of glowing lights that guide her to the sea. There, using the cloak, she transforms into a seal, where we learn that she's a Selkie like her mother, and swims freely with her newfound kin. However, when the grandma finds Shersey washed up ashore in the middle of the night, she insists on bringing them back to the city, where it's much safer for them. We soon learn, by entering this city that it's actually Halloween, or Samhain. And the reason why this is important is because according to Irish legend, the barrier between the spirit world and the real world weakens on Samhain. Soon, Cersei starts playing the conch, which draws the attention of a trio of magical spirits who live in this town. They capture the two siblings under the guise of Halloween costumes and play a jolly little tune with Cersei. After that, the spirits tell them that Cersei has a responsibility as a Selkie to protect the spirits that live in all of Ireland, which leads them to elaborating on the giant MacLear. MacLear was the son of a witch named Macha, and upon losing his true love, MacLear cried a literal ocean of tears, and the only way to stop this flooding of the world was Macha sealing off all of his emotions into jars, turning him to stone. Since then, Macha has been enacting this on all the spirits in the land, stealing their emotions and turning them to stone. Now, this may seem like a footnote in my review, but it's actually a big part of the film. It was heavily foreshadowed in the prologue, the legend is talked about throughout the film, it parallels Connor's arc of his heart turning to stone after his wife's death, and it has great thematic relevance for the main character's conflict of grief. Ever since Bronag's death, and subsequently Cersei's birth, Ben has held a resentment for his sister, and the father is too emotionally disconnected to know how to fix this problem. Both Ben and Connor are stricken with grief over the loss of their family, and neither one has the courage to come to terms with that grief. This conflict will reach its peak near the end though, so for now... As the siblings learn of this legend, they are intercepted by a band of owls sent by the witch Macha, and although they manage to evade their threat for a while on their journey, Cersei is soon captured by the owls. Ben is now forced to continue this journey alone as he desperately searches for his sister. Along the way, he meets an old and very bearded man called the Shanachie, or the Historian. Through his threads of hair, Ben can see all of his memories, but the most important memory he faces is the night of his mother's death. When he sees that Bronag's death wasn't his sister's fault, but merely his mom transferring her life force to Cersei, it finally gives him the closure he needed. He witnesses that Connor was completely helpless to stop Bronag's fate, and the emotional burden it left on Connor was something Ben hadn't even considered before. Ooh, this writing is so good! Once Ben frees himself from his mind and this cave, we enter the third act of the film. And... okay, guys, this entire last 30 minutes are fucking incredible. The visuals on display for the remainder of the movie are nothing short of hypnotic. The art direction here gives Miyazaki a run for his money. Ben finds the witch Macha's house stationed in the middle of a lake, surrounded by a magical storm of sorts. But when he goes in, it looks nearly identical to his grandma's setup. The only big difference is there are jars of emotions and spirits strewn about, and Macha doesn't appear to be hostile in any way. Yet. We find out that Macha has been collecting her emotions and the emotions of every living thing she can get her hands on to soothe the pain of her son MacLear's fate. And when Ben enters her house, still hurt by the loss of his mother and now his sister, he is easily tempted by Macha's welcoming demeanor. However, Ben manages to find Cersei trapped in Macha's house in the attic, weak and frail, and only through the musical magic of the conch shell can these emotions be freed. Ben, rather than pressuring his sister to save their lives, comforts Cersei for the first time with their mother's song, which gives her a last final push to save them. Cersei manages to play the conch as much as she can, which soon causes all of Macha's emotions to break free from their confinement. But rather than destroying her, it causes her to break down in shambles, and we learn that Macha is just as grief-stricken as our main characters. This whole segment in Macha's house is goddamn spectacular. From the writing and the themes coinciding with the character work for both Ben and Macha, and the slow build pacing, it's all perfectly executed with a light-hearted surrealism. It would have been such an easy resolution to just destroy the evil witch and live happily ever after. But the fact that Ben learns that Macha is just as sorrowful and hurt as as he is, it reaffirms his prior realization that there was never a clear-cut bad guy or good guy. Everyone in this story was suffering and coping with grief in their own ways, and it isn't until they finally come face to face with their emotions that they can finally start to heal. Which is not only a wonderful message, but it's perhaps one of the healthiest and most mature messages I've seen conveyed in an animated film. But it doesn't stop there, as Maka grants the children the ability to soar across the sea with her magic, where they arrive back home and get to MacLear's island. Now that Cersei has her mother's coat and her family's love, she rejuvenates herself by singing the titular Song of the Sea. Now this whole fucking part. I don't know how to fully express how beautiful it is. The music, the animation, the compositing, the emotions. It's fucking unfair, man. This whole sequence is fucking unfair. Cersei's song frees all the spirits from their stone prisons Maka put them in, as well as MacLear, who is finally reunited with his mother after all this time. And to top it all off, the family gets to see Brona one last time. They all share one last loving embrace, moments before she drifts off into the spirit realm. Connor, Ben, and Cersei begin a new life, finally free from the grief that's been pulling them apart for 6 years. I don't think I've seen the concept of grief executed with such tact and grace in a kid's film. It's definitely been done before and done perfectly well in other movies, but Song of the Sea does something different. A lesser film would have stated its themes throughout the whole movie, making it obvious what the message is. But Song of the Sea puts its themes and concepts strictly in the visuals and music. From Ben's realistic angst and regret about his mom, to Connor and MacLear's sorrowful parallels, to Shawan's cultural purpose in the film, to the lyrics of the songs. This movie lets you extrapolate all that information for yourself, and never lets the dialogue get in the way of it. And that's what I love about this movie. It's a purely visual journey complemented by thoughtful dialogue and fleshed out characterization, topped off with a heart of pure gold. Okay, next one. Ooh boy, this is a heavy one. The breadwinner is Nora Tumei's directorial debut at Cartoon Saloon, and wow. Just wow. She did not pull any punches with this one. Now, obviously, this movie is an adaptation of the book by the same name. A book that I have not read, so I can't make any comparisons in that regard. All I can do is judge the movie on its own merits. But even though I haven't read the book, anyone can tell by watching this that there was so much love, care, and thought that went into this adaptation. This is a passion project through and through. The plot centers around a young girl in Afghanistan named Parwana, whose family has been financially suffering due to the Soviet-Afghan war they're caught in the middle of. Under the cruel dominion the Taliban have over her hometown of Kabul, Parwana and her father try to make ends meet by selling their own possessions in the town square. But when an angry teenage boy berates her father for having his daughter out in public, the boy tracks the family down and has the father arrested for exposing a woman in public. With no male authority figure to help the family, Parwana, her sister, and mother unanimously agree to have her masquerade as a boy so she can purchase food for the family, which actually works to Parwana's amazement. The film brilliantly contrasts her experience as a girl and a boy in Kabul mainly through the lighting, staging, and backgrounds. As a girl walking through the streets, the settings are filled with muted colors, they're threatening and very unsettling, and her animation perfectly captures how she's in complete fear for her life, knowing she can be arrested, beaten, or killed at any moment. But as a boy, the streets are bright and gold. She can stroll anywhere without anyone saying a thing, and even though she's demeaned for being a kid at times, she can receive goods and services as well as simple human decency. sometimes. But honestly, I'm not gonna get into spoilers for this one, at all, because from that point onward, the movie becomes a character study of Parwana and how she tries to find ways to free her father from jail. We see the friends she makes, the people she helps, her family that she tries desperately to care for, and the horrors she's exposed to. It's a rather nerve-wracking ride of plot turns that has a complete hold on your emotions throughout. There's less of a focus on story and more on the world building and character interaction, which I must say both are solid as all fuck. There is a very strong political commentary not only on how the Soviet-Afghan War influenced the Middle East's culture, but it heavily scrutinizes the very sexist and murderous politics that the Taliban implemented at the time, and it is not afraid to show how aggressively and abusively the Taliban treated the citizens and, more specifically, the women of the city. But at the same time, it never ham-fists its socio-political themes, because at the end of the day, no matter how cruel and how punishing this society is to our main characters, we see that most are a victim of some form of oppression. Even one of the scummiest characters in the film, Idris, this loud, scrawny dog, yells at everyone to assert his childish sense of authority, but even he lives under the firm and unforgiving hands of his superiors. And this is something that all Saloon films do fantastically. No one is really the bad guy, and no one is really the good guy. We're all just people who have our own cultural and emotional conditioning, and sometimes people only know so far as what they've been conditioned to know. It's that kind of three-dimensional writing that separates it from animated films that tackle similar subject matter. Even when the narrative has concluded, the war transpiring has only just begun, and the social and societal issues that were present in the beginning of the film are obviously unresolved. In fact, if anything, they're strengthened. It's that bittersweetness and harsh reality that makes this movie feel so goddamn real. Also, no spoilers, but shout out to my boy Razak. This guy is awesome. Best character. You really helped us out, man. Thank you. As far as the animation goes, the 2D work is obviously fantastic, and every so often we get these very ambitious and creative stop-motion puppet segments when Parwana is telling her story to her infant brother. But what really floored me about this movie was how naturalistic and visceral the voice acting was. Every single one of these actors are fucking awesome, and the absolutely stellar sound design, especially in the marketplace. This is some of the most effective Foley art and voice acting I've heard in an animated film. As for how this movie fares against the others in the library, I'd definitely say this is the darkest and most realistic out of all of them. Unlike the others, it's very gritty, bleak, and takes place somewhere other than Ireland. Also, there's no magic or mystical forces at play. This is the real world. And rather than lush, detailed backgrounds, the settings are simple, minimalistic, and use an array of earth tones. And because of how different the visuals and subject matter are, it makes it stand out among the rest as the most daring. Though I must admit, this is not a film I would regularly watch. It's very intense and not necessarily pleasant at times, which is obviously the point of the film. It's meant to make you uncomfortable, which I very much appreciate it for. Either way, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I enjoy it just a little bit more than Kells. Its execution and production value are clearly better, as is the voice acting. Plus Razak, man, he is a real one. What a guy. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this one. I guess Wolfwalkers is next. All right, here we go. Wolfwalkers is arguably the best movie this studio has made so far. And, this movie is fucking awesome. While Song of the Sea is definitely the studio's pride, considering how entrenched it is in Celtic legend, Wolfwalkers definitely gives it a run for its money in terms of presentation, writing, and visuals. Song of the Sea's themes, mystic lore, visual storytelling, and music are much more prominent players in the story, and form the backbone of the script and storyboards. Wolfwalkers is a more universal and traditionally told straightforward story that anyone can easily identify with. The basic story is, a small walled-off city— hey, wait a minute— in Kilkenny is living in fear of a pack of wolves, two of which are wolfwalkers, druids who possess healing magic that live in harmony with nature. Meanwhile, a young girl named Robin, who lives with her very protective and exhausted father in the walled city, sneaks out into the woods one day to save her pet falcon, and meets Mabe, one of the two wolfwalkers. Though they start off on the wrong foot, they slowly form a friendship over the course of a few days, which, of course, clashes with the Lord Protector's very strict anti-wolf policy. Now, I'm simplifying a lot here and condensing a bunch of information and context, but I really don't want to spoil this one. You should really watch it for yourself. It's on Apple TV, which, yeah, I know, another fucking streaming service. This one barely has anything on it, honestly. They don't even have a fucking search bar, that's how little they have. But I promise you, this movie alone is worth signing up for it. The style of animation here is the most ambitious and diverse it's ever been. It ranges from fluid, bouncy, and smooth to graphic and angular, with smudgy black lines, harsh shadows, and changing aspect ratios, which correlates with the emotions of the characters and the story. On top of that, we get these wonderful storybook-like images throughout that help sell the fairy tale atmosphere, including these fantastic hand-drawn animated layouts for the wolf vision. These are some of the best visuals I've seen since fucking Spider-Verse, which, hey, only 2 years apart, not bad. Also, I love how they animate fire in this movie. It looks fucking gorgeous. And I suppose I should mention that the relationship between Robin and Mabe is really endearing. They have a lovely sisterly rapport, and both kid actors are selling the hell out of their dialogue. Not to mention their designs perfectly represent their characters. Mabe is a fiery ball of energy and emotions, whereas Robin is more blocky and slender, which reflects how she's being raised to be a proper maiden in society. And speaking of which, spoiler time, time code, see you there. I think out of all the Saloon films, this one has the best pacing. Each scene is balanced with equal portions of energized movement and calm, slower animation. So the film constantly holds your attention even in the lulls of the story. In fact, the slower scenes in between the more actiony scenes still do a great job of conveying a sense of scale and dramatic tension. The best example scenes I can think of have to be when Robin admits to her father she ventured into the woods outside the walls, and instead of it going the way she was playing it out earlier, Goodfellow gets very angry with Robin, as the lighting and borders get more intense and harsh as his rage builds. Another great scene is when Robin tries to tell Mabe that her captive mother wants her to leave the forest out of fear what Lord Protector will do to them, but Mabe, being an irrational, ill-tempered child, sees that Robin did nothing to free her mother and rejects her friendship. The messy, jagged line work and aspect ratio in these scenes do an excellent job of selling the emotional beats of the plot. Whether it be sadness, fear, action, or drama, the camera and backgrounds are the primary storyteller, especially in the third act. The harsh red and blacks of the town square scene contrasting with the yellows and blues in the forest showdown are some of the best compositions and color keying the studio has made. This style actually reminds me of Samurai Jack and Primal, not just the visuals but the action too. It feels very similar in terms of staging and intensity. Also, this ending is honestly one of the best things ever. Fuck society, become a druid, and live among wolves with your new thick BBW wife. Hell yeah. Now granted, this is not a very subtle movie, at least nowhere near as subtle as Song of the Sea, but thankfully it doesn't detract from the entertainment value, at least for me. Song of the Sea had a much better handle on how it executed its themes and arcs through the visuals and actions of the characters. But I don't think this makes Wolfwalkers a bad movie, not at all, it's damn spectacular. I just think Song of the Sea is the better of the two because of its subtlety. With that said, I still highly recommend it, because it's a wonderful piece of escapism, and, like all these other films, it has wonderful rewatch value. Overall, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. A marvelous triumph, a stunning tour de force. You'll stand up and cheer. Alright, now that I've reviewed all the Cartoon Saloon films, I gotta rank them. Boom! Here you go. Yeah, I think this is pretty fair. Yeah. But here's the thing, the weaker films in this lineup are light years away from being bad films. I'm just ranking them in comparison to each other, because that's really the only way you can judge these movies. And besides, at the end of the day, any one of these films fucking trampled Disney without any effort. So yeah, they all win. Each one of these movies, with all their strengths and weaknesses, treats their stories, characters, and mythology with respect and dignity. They create vast creative worlds that all abide by some form of magic, and they capture the wonder and amazement of childhood nostalgia pitted against the cynicism and apprehension of adulthood in the most uniquely heartfelt ways. Cartoon Saloon may have only made 4 films so far, but already it's apparent that they are a massive force to be reckoned with. And thank the Lord Penis that 2D hand-drawn cinematic animation has finally come back in full swing. I did it. I reviewed all these films. Now I can go back to talking about real art. Like anime.